You know, usually when we talk about a business crisis, there's this expectation of just absolute chaos.
Oh, yeah. Total panic.
Right, like a major client abruptly drops out, or a product launch completely flatlines, or the market takes a sudden dive. And the immediate reaction for most people is to, run around like the building is on fire, grabbing whatever is closest to the door.
Yeah, it's the classic amateur reaction. It's this frantic, uh, adrenaline-fueled scramble to just throw buckets of water at the immediate flames right in front of you.
Exactly.
You aren't thinking about the structural integrity of the building at all. You just want the heat to stop.
Right. It's totally reactive survival mode. But then, if you look at how highly successful leaders operate in that exact same burning building, they aren't scrambling.
No, they're not.
And they also aren't doing something absurd like, calmly rearranging the furniture while the walls burn down. Instead, they're looking at the building's schematics.
Hmm.
They're trying to find the ventilation shafts to figure out how to, cut off the oxygen supply that's feeding the fire.
That is a much more accurate way to look at strategic calm. I mean, they aren't ignoring the fire, but they also aren't getting blinded by it.
Right.
They're analyzing the underlying mechanisms of the crisis, mostly because they are already calculating what happens after the smoke clears.
And exploring that mindset is our mission for you today. So welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive where we are examining a really fascinating perspective on strategic thinking.
Just a great one.
Our goal today is to look at a specific playbook for approaching your career, your business, and your ambitions by essentially treating life like a highly complex chessboard.
And to do that, we are unpacking a bookie summary of your next 5 moves, which is by Patrick Bet-David
Yeah.
with Greg Dinkin.
Yeah.
And the core premise running through this whole text is that, amateurs panic when the board gets complicated, but grandmasters maintain their focus because they've trained themselves to anticipate their next 5 moves, regardless of the chaos in front of them.
Before we get into what those actual moves are, I think it really helps to understand the lens through which Patrick Bet-David is viewing the world, right? Because his personal background heavily colors the strategies in this book.
It really does. It's foundational.
He is an Iranian immigrant who came to the U.S. as a teenager. He navigated some fairly massive challenges early on, and he went on to found the PHP agency, which is a financial services company noted for its really rapid expansion.
Yeah, massive growth.
Plus, he's the creator of the Valuetainment YouTube channel. So the source material we are looking at today isn't purely, academic theory. It's a very specific framework built by a CEO based on his own lived experiences.
Which is super important context,
Yeah.
because the very first concept the text introduces requires a pretty deep look inward. Before you can strategically move any pieces on the board, you really have to understand the psychology of the person actually playing the game. And this is move 1, which is mastering self-awareness.
The inner game. Now, I feel like almost every business book talks about, knowing what you want, but the summary highlights a much sharper approach here.
It's a lot more aggressive.
Yeah. But David argues for using your pain, your past failures, and even the people who have doubted you, your haters, as a primary fuel source.
Right.
The text suggests that instead of processing shame or rejection as a reason to retreat, you actively transform those negative emotions into a driving force.
It's a huge reframe of how we typically handle adversity, right? Because normally the instinct is to bury professional rejections or, pretend a failure didn't hurt.
Oh, totally. Brush it under the rug.
Exactly.
Yep.
But the source material argues for the exact opposite. Look directly at those moments of disdain and use the sheer frustration of them to clarify your ambition.
Wow.
And the text pairs this with the practice of visualization. But it's not just like daydreaming. It's about embodying your future truth.
Future truth.
Yeah. You make decisions today as if the future you are aiming for has already materialized. You surround yourself with the words, the visuals, the philosophies of your heroes to engineer this environment that just refuses to let you settle.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because knowing who you are also means having a very sobering realization about where you actually belong.
Oh, for sure.
It's kind of like choosing your vehicle before a massive ocean race. You have to take a hard look in the mirror and figure out if you are genuinely built to be the captain of a risky, highly unpredictable pirate ship.
Which is essentially what an entrepreneur is.
Exactly. Or, conversely, maybe you would thrive significantly better as a brilliant, highly compensated commander in a well-funded, secure Navy, meaning an entrepreneur.
I love that. That analogy perfectly captures the nuance the text is trying to establish here, because there is this really toxic myth in modern business culture that entrepreneurship is the only valid path to success.
Right, everyone has to be a founder now.
Exactly. But the source text explicitly validates the entrepreneur route. I mean, entrepreneurship carries a psychological weight and a level of financial risk that simply does not align with everyone's DNA.
It really doesn't.
You can build incredible wealth and drive massive innovation from within the secure framework of an established organization. The goal isn't to force yourself onto the pirate ship if you get seasick, right? The goal is to find your blue ocean.
And what does that look like in practice?
It means identifying a market or a specific role within a company that has unmet needs, low competition, and perfectly aligns with your specific unique skill set.
Okay, but I do want to introduce a critical viewpoint here because the source material actually challenges its own premise a bit.
Yeah, it does.
Like, is a relentless focus on self-awareness and using your personal pain as fuel really the only thing separating the grandmasters from the amateurs?
It's a very necessary pushback. And the summary actually brings in outside scholarship to contextualize Bet David's framework. It references Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers to provide a broader interpretation of success.
Right, because Gladwell takes a very different angle.
He does. While Bet David's methodology focuses heavily on individual agency, mastering your internal state to force external results, that perspective can sometimes overlook structural realities.
Yeah.
Gladwell's work points out that external factors like a person's socioeconomic starting line, systemic inequalities, cultural timing, and unearned privilege, those play an undeniable role in shaping a person's trajectory.
Right, because the reality is that not everyone has the luxury of simply transforming a traumatic failure into motivation. And finding a pristine blue ocean is a lot easier when you have a safety net.
The point the critical analysis makes, the takeaway isn't that self-awareness is useless, not at all. It's that you need a multidimensional perspective. You absolutely should audit your identity and clarify your drives. But you have to pair that internal foundation with an honest acknowledgement of the real-world dynamics you're actually navigating.
I think that's an incredibly practical concept for you as you're listening right now. Just think back to a recent professional setback you experienced. Maybe a promotion you missed or a pitch that got rejected.
Yeah, we've all had them.
How might you take the sting of that rejection and reframe it as push motivation, while simultaneously acknowledging the external variables you couldn't control? It's about extracting the fuel without absorbing unnecessary guilt.
Which brings us to a really critical pivot point. Let's say you've done that internal audit. You know your identity, you found your vehicle, and you're sailing along.
Okay.
What happens when a storm hits and the reality of the market just punches you in the mouth?
It always happens eventually.
Right. And your identity is only as strong as your ability to process the crisis. So this is move 2, which is mastering the ability to reason.
The summary anchors this section with a principle from the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, which is, control rests within your mind, not external events.
A classic.
So this entire move is about the mechanics of how you process a problem.
Because processing is the defining mechanism of the Grandmaster. To illustrate this, the text draws a hard line between two distinct behavioral profiles. You have surface-level processors and you have deep-level processors.
Okay, what's the difference?
Surface-level processors are completely reactive. When, say, a supply chain issue delays a product, their immediate instinct is to externalize the blame. They complain about the vendor, they look for a quick temporary workaround, or they escape into distractions.
Basically reacting to the symptom.
Exactly. But deep-level processors operate like investigators. If that same supply chain breaks down, they don't just yell at the vendor, they ask probing questions.
Right, they want to know the underlying mechanism of the failure.
Yes. Like, why were we relying on a single vendor to begin with? Who approved that contract? They prioritize clear facts over protecting their own ego, and they look for a permanent architectural solution rather than just slapping a Band-Aid over the leak.
And to transition from surface to deep processing, Bet David introduces a specific framework called the ITR methodology.
Investment, time, and return.
Right. And the idea is that when a deep processor faces a complex crisis, they don't just go with their gut instinct. They force themselves to create 3 distinct proposals for how to proceed.
Let's actually walk through how that works, because I think the mechanics are what make it so useful.
Let's do it.
Let's say you are a department head, and your best software engineer just quits right before a massive deadline. A service processor might just panic and offer the engineer double their salary to stay. But using the ITR method, How does a deep processor handle it?
Well, they would map out 3 scenarios, right? Proposal A might be exactly that. Counteroffer the engineer. The investment is high financially, the time cost is low because they already know the job, but the long-term return is terrible.
How is it terrible?
Because you've just proven to the whole team that threatening to quit gets people raises.
Good point. Okay, what's proposal B?
Proposal B might be to hire an external agency to finish the project. The investment is moderate, the time to onboard them is moderate, and the return is a finished project, but you have no retained knowledge in-house.
Okay, and C.
Proposal C might be to promote a junior developer and just push the deadline back. The investment is low, the time cost is very high, but the long-term return is that you've just built extreme loyalty and developed a new senior team member.
And you calculate the ITR for all 3 before you ever make a move.
I love the structure of that, but I do have to push back a little on the reality of executing it.
Oh, how so?
Well, it sounds amazing on a whiteboard to calmly calculate the ITR of 3 different proposals, but in the real world, when a client is screaming on the phone and revenue is dropping, humans aren't flawless, emotionless chess computers.
Right, the adrenaline is pumping.
I know personally when I face sudden high-stakes problems, my brain just screams, "Fix it now." How do you account for the fact that panic physically alters how we think?
What's fascinating here is that the critical interpretation included in the summary uses that exact human flaw to contextualize this move.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The text brings in the work of behavioral economist Daniel Kahneman, specifically his concepts from thinking fast and slow.
Ah, okay.
And Kahneman's research demonstrates that relying purely on your assumption that you are a logical creature ignores the biological reality of cognitive biases.
Right. His concept of System 1 versus System 2 thinking. System 1 is our fast, emotional, reflexive brain, and System 2 is the slow, analytical brain.
Precisely. When the client is screaming, your System 1 brain takes the wheel. It wants a fast solution to just make the yelling stop. So the critical takeaway is that mastering reason isn't about pretending you don't feel panic.
Right.
It's about acknowledging your blind spots. The ITR method is essentially a tool designed to force your System 1 brain to shut down, so your System 2 analytical brain actually has time to boot up.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, the best grandmasters know their judgment is compromised under stress, so they rely on a predetermined processing system, and they actively invite colleagues to poke holes in their logic.
And that concept of inviting others to challenge your logic is actually the perfect bridge to our next concept.
It is.
Because even if you are a master of the ITR method and completely aware of your own biases, you are still only one person. You cannot play every piece on the board simultaneously.
No, you can't.
A brilliant strategy means nothing if you don't have the right pieces in play. Which leads us to move 3. Mastering building the right team, which requires completely dismantling the myth of the solopreneur.
The text is very firm on this. The solopreneur is an illusion. No matter how much of a visionary you are, exponential long-term success is fundamentally impossible without collaborating with partners, securing the right clients, and building a highly competent team.
Yeah, people try to do it all themselves.
All the time. Highly driven people often suffer from a delegation bottleneck. They believe no one can do it as well as they can, but that mindset guarantees a hard ceiling on your growth.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because Bet David completely flips the traditional hiring script.
He does.
The summary states that you must recruit people to yourself before you ever try to recruit them to your business.
It's a huge shift.
I think of it like assembling an elite superhero team. You can't just expect top-tier talent to join your squad simply because you have a lucrative compensation package or a clever software product. You have to prove that you are a captain worth following into battle.
Exactly.
It reframes the interview process entirely. It's not just the employee auditioning for the role, it's an ongoing audition for the leader.
That is a fundamental paradigm shift. I mean, a traditional manager focuses on what they can extract from an employee, but a grandmaster focuses on what they can offer the employee's life trajectory.
Yeah.
And the text outlines 5 specific internal questions that any high-value candidate is silently asking themselves while you are interviewing them.
Let's run through those because they really highlight this shift.
Okay.
So they're asking, what actually distinguishes your company from the 50 others hiring right now? How does your specific leadership style differ from their last boss?
Right.
Do you operate by a clear code of honor? And more importantly, do your actions actually embody it? What intangible benefits will they gain just by being associated with you? And finally, are you personally demonstrating continuous growth as a leader?
If you look closely at those 5 questions, almost none of them are about the baseline salary or the 401k match.
Not at all.
They are entirely about character, association, and momentum. If you want to attract lions, which is what the text calls truly elite performers, your character has to be the most compelling product your company offers.
Wow, your character is the product.
Yes. Furthermore, the summary emphasizes that recruitment doesn't end when the offer letter is signed. It's a continuous process. You retain top talent through a constant, active reassessment of their career trajectory and their benefits. You should be recruiting your best people to stay with you every single month.
So, if we take inventory here, we have audited our identity and chosen our vehicle in move 1. We have installed the ITR framework to process crises without panicking in move 2. And we have built an undeniable elite team by recruiting to our character in move 3.
We got the pieces on the board.
Exactly. Now, what are we actually doing with all this infrastructure? We have to deploy it. That is move 4. Mastering strategy to scale. This is where we move from standard business operations into the pursuit of exponential growth.
And to scale effectively, without the whole machine breaking apart, a leader first has to know exactly where the company sits on the map. The summary breaks the life cycle of every business endeavor into 4 distinct phases.
Okay, what are they?
Formulation, survival, momentum, and finally, the plateau.
Right.
And the key here is that the strategy that gets you out of the survival phase will actively sabotage you in the momentum phase. So a leader must constantly diagnose which phase they are in.
And to manage the complexity of that growth, the text introduces the strategy quadrant. The idea is that a CEO cannot just focus on one thing. They must balance 4 crucial areas simultaneously: operating systems, business development and sales, innovative campaigns, and leadership development.
The balance is what makes the quadrant work. Because think about it, if you have a leader who is obsessed with business development, that they're just selling, but they completely ignore operating systems, what happens?
The wheels fall off.
Right. They bring in a massive influx of new clients, the internal infrastructure can't handle the volume, customer service plummets, and the company collapses under its own weight.
It's a disaster.
But conversely, if you only focus on operating systems but ignore innovative campaigns, you build a perfectly efficient company that eventually becomes entirely obsolete.
To keep those innovative campaigns moving, the text describes a specific type of visionary leadership that uses reality distortion. This concept is about setting expectations that seem completely unreasonable to force the team to think outside their current paradigms. It makes me think of a scenario where a leader doesn't just say, let's increase subscription revenue by 10%.
Which is standard.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead, they walk into the room and ask, how do we completely restructure our model so our core software is entirely free to the user by next year?
Wow.
It sounds impossible, but it forces the brain to abandon incremental thinking and hunt for massive structural innovations.
And that level of challenge is exactly how the text says you must manage those lions we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Elite performers get bored easily. You manage a standout performer by constantly putting massive, seemingly impossible new challenges in front of them, engaging their drive to conquer.
But that raises a very practical question for me. If you have a team of lions and you as the leader are constantly using reality distortion to throw these massive challenges at them, pushing relentlessly for exponential growth, how do you keep the momentum going without the entire team just burning out?
That's a great question.
High expectations are great, but adrenaline only lasts so long.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is exactly why the strategy quadrant places such a heavy structural emphasis on operating systems and data-driven accountability.
Okay.
The Grandmaster knows that you cannot scale purely on motivational speeches and late nights. The systems have to bear the weight of the growth, not just the people.
So the data protects the team from the leader's ambition.
Precisely. You create a culture based on measurable performance, not just perceived effort. When your growth is managed by rigorous metrics and your capital plan is deeply aligned with your ambitions, meaning you know exactly when the data says to bootstrap, when it makes sense to borrow, or when you actually need to seek outside investors, the growth becomes sustainable.
It's controlled expansion.
Yes, and to maintain that control, the final rule the text offers for this phase is beautifully blunt. Stay paranoid.
Stay paranoid.
Yes, the moment you achieve momentum, complacency becomes your biggest threat. You have to remain constantly alert to shifts in the market, competitive threats, and internal inefficiencies. Paranoia, when channeled productively, ensures your systems never get lazy.
So what does this all mean for you navigating your own career path? Whether you are a CEO looking to disrupt a global market, an entrepreneur trying to launch a new initiative inside a legacy corporation, or someone just trying to bring order to a complex personal ambition, this sequential framework really holds up.
It really does.
It starts with move one, understanding your deepest motivations and honestly auditing your identity. It moves to move two, utilizing systems like the ITR method to process chaotic crises without letting your cognitive biases drive the car.
Right.
Then, move three, building an undeniable team by making your character the ultimate recruiting tool. And finally, move four, scaling your ambitions by balancing the strategy quadrant and maintaining a healthy dose of productive paranoia. Treating your life like a grandmaster treats a chessboard is ultimately about taking back your agency.
It absolutely is. You move from being a victim of circumstance to being the architect of your response.
Yeah.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder that builds on the life cycle we just discussed.
Okay.
The book outlines the 4 phases of a startup, and it notes that the final phase is the plateau. In business and in life, almost everyone views a plateau as a failure.
Oh, definitely. It feels like you're stuck.
It's the moment the exciting momentum stops. But consider this perspective. What if the plateau isn't a failure at all? What if a plateau is simply the universe's signal that you're required to return to Mufrafa 1?
A forced reset.
Exactly. When you hit a wall in your career or your business stops growing, maybe the solution isn't to look outward for a new sales strategy or a new marketing gimmick. Maybe the solution is to look inward and conduct a new personal identity audit. Ask yourself today, what plateau you're currently sitting on in your own life? And more importantly, who do you need to become to trigger your very next formulation phase?
That is a phenomenal question to carry with you this week. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you find yourself standing in a burning building, we hope you don't scramble and we hope you don't rearrange the furniture. We hope you look for the schematics. Until next time.